Today's date is July 7th, 2016. My name is Leah Michelle Cash. I am interviewing Tonya Burke for the Archiving History Project in the Inland Empire. Her name is spelled, Tonya, if you could spell your correct name for me.
Tonyaburke.
We are interviewing in the home of Wilma Amina Carter in the city of Rialto in the state of California. Thank you, Ms. Burke, for taking out the time to conduct this interview with us.
Thank you.
So, tell us a little bit about your beginnings, where you were raised, what your family life was like, how many siblings you have, so on and so forth.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Carson, California, which is in down south in the South Bay area of Los Angeles County. And grew up there, loved it, having my parents, Herbert and Kareem Brown, who raised me with no siblings. So I grew up as an only child. And growing up as an only child, I had to spend a lot of time alone. And I was always one of those creative type of kids who was always thinking and doing and wanting to find ways to change the world. So it's my parents always say. And so I spent a lot of time as a child because I was by myself reading.
Dream building.
I read a lot. I read day and night as a child, and I found a lot of pleasure in it because to me the books I was reading was opening up a whole nother world for me, and that's how I learned a lot. So my parents would always buy me tons of books, and I spent a lot of time.
What's some of your favorite books that you read that actually made an impact on you?
One, as a small child, Judy Blume was my favorite. I think I read everything that she had, and as I got a little older, I started reading Zora Neale Hurston and some other prominent authors, and but I just always had a love for reading, and I always had a love for like organizing. As a kid and going to school, went to school in South Central Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And
name those high schools: elementary, middle, high school.
I went to a private school, which was called Covenant Lutheran. And I went there from, I believe, first grade all the way to the 8th grade. And then 9th grade, I went to Dotson Middle School, which was in the San Pedro area. And then high school, went to Carson High School. And my parents always told me early on, they always felt that I would be either a politician or an attorney, because while I was in school, I was always organizing, always, if there was an issue or a cause that was happening at the school, I was the one that was always taking that up and rallying students and teachers together to change,
bring about
change in the schools. So, when I got older and when I decided to run, when I told my parents I decided to run for public office, they said they weren't surprised at all. I think I was more surprised than they were, because I've always, even in college, I've always just been very actively engaged in the community and wanting to bring about change and bettering people's lives.
So backing it up to high school, did you hold an office in high school?
Well, in 9th grade, I ran for student body treasurer and won that. And all throughout high school, I was in ASB. If there was an organization, I was involved in it and held different positions and those different organizations on campus. Okay. Black Student Union. I was the captain of the pep squad, and
all of that.
Yeah, all of those different things.
So you were a very active teenager.
Very, very active teenager.
So in all of that activity, and reading and educating yourself and seeking to bring about change. What is it when you graduated from high school that led you to the college that you went to and the discipline that you chose?
Okay. Well, I got my bachelor's degree from UC Santa Cruz. And I was one of those kids, because I did read a lot. I think in another life I must have been a researcher, because I love to research. And I was one of those kids that did a lot of research, and especially when it came to what school I was going to. I always knew I was going to college. My parents always told me that if that's what you want to do, that's what you're going to do, regardless of finances or any other thing. College is going to be a part of your life. And so I grew up knowing that and prepared myself for, okay, this is going to be the next step. Even though, individuals would tell me otherwise. I've had some teachers, I've had, other individuals, whether they meant well or not, say, oh, that's not for you, or you can't afford it, or, or not necessarily go on the university level, start off on the community college level. Because I also, while I was in high school, I also went to community college. I went to Harbor College while I was in high school. So I just had that in mind, what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. When I was thinking about colleges to attend, I chose UC Santa Cruz because, one, it had the lowest number of student-to-teacher ratio. I didn't want to go to a school where when I was in a class, I would be in a class of 500 or 600, and that was a number and not a name. So that's why I chose UC Santa Cruz. And also, they, at the time, of all the UCs, they were the ones giving the best financial aid packages. So, those are some of the reasons why I chose to go to UC Santa Cruz. And I went to Santa Cruz and majored in psychology. That wasn't my initial plan. My initial plan was, I wanted to be pre-med. And I thought about, okay, I want to go to medical school. And after I started taking those organic chemistry and biology classes, and I said, this is not for me. I actually was taking a general education class for psychology and fell in love with the subject and instantly changed my major.
So now hitting the campus at Santa Cruz. How did you feel as an African American woman?
It was very difficult, because there were times, because UC Santa Cruz at the time, I believe the percentage of African Americans that were attending the school was less than 5%. So there would be times.
Less than 5%.
Yes,
that's a small number.
That's a very small number, and there would be times where I would be on the campus, and I wouldn't see anyone else that looked like me, even closely, remotely could look like me, in weeks. Even in the city, it would be large spans of times where I wouldn't even see another African American. And really, you had to kind of seek, other individuals if you wanted to have that type of engagement and interaction. And sometimes in the classroom, most of the time in the classroom, I would be the only African American student in the classroom. And I remember having experiences where, because I was the only African American in the classroom, you become the African American expert, of the African American culture. And I remember being in a lecture, and the instructor, she was talking about different cultures, and somehow we got on the subject of ghettos, and the instructor turned to me and asked me to elaborate on the subject. And I said, um, I'm sorry, I wouldn't be able to, because that's not familiar to me. But it was just the just the stereotype of, if you're African American. Or I would get asked questions like, oh, do you know NWA, or what's it like, knowing this rapper, or so just that stereotype of, if you're African American, you're automatically associated with certain
stereotypes or certain things.
Yes.
Not understanding that there's a wide variety of African Americans that come from many different cultures and backgrounds.
Yes, and it was very difficult my first year, because first year living on campus, I lived in a part of campus where, because the campus, UC Santa Cruz, is broken up into 8 different colleges. Now they have 10. At the time it was 8. And the college that you are associated with, that's really where your residence is. Mm-hmm. And so Kresge, which was the college in which I resided, I believe at the time there was about maybe 4 African Americans that actually resided in that particular college. And so my roommates were other than African American, and all of them were Caucasian. And I had one roommate in particular who came from a racist background. Her parents were very racist, very rich and affluent, and she and I initially had some problems, because she didn't want to reside in the apartment that we stayed in. It was 7 of us in this one cog, as they called it. And she didn't want to stay in the apartment because I was black. And but after a year, we ended up becoming like the best of friends. So
that always happens, doesn't it? If people stay the course.
Yeah.
If they just stay the course, then you will find out exactly what Maya Angelou says: we are more alike than we are different.
Yeah, her having experiences with me, she was able to dispel the myths and the stereotypes of what she has always seen and heard. Coming from a small town where there weren't any African Americans, where she came from. So she was able to and she ended up dating and marrying an African American man.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So, but she ended up being one of my good friends towards the end of that school year. So.
Okay, so that's pretty much the experience at UC Santa Cruz. And then you move on. During that time, is that when you get married, or is it later on after graduating from college?
Well, actually, when I was in college, I became a single parent.
Okay.
I was in a relationship with my oldest 2 children's father. It wasn't the best of relationships. It actually was a really bad relationship, but it's something that I overcame. I ended up becoming a single parent of 2 children, and they are, I call them college babies, because I remember, because I was determined to finish school and graduate and get my degree. I had a lot of people telling me that I couldn't do it. A lot of folks told me otherwise. I remember I had just found out the day previously I went to go see my counselor, because I was struggling at school, being a single parent.
And rightly so.
And Santa Cruz is one of those areas where it's very expensive, and child care was very expensive. So I was working 3-4 jobs, trying to pay the rent, trying to pay for child care. Child care cost more than I was paying in rent, and trying to, raise my children. And I had just found out my son was diagnosed with autism. And so I went to my counselor and really just needed someone to talk to and some guidance. And I'll never forget, I can remember the day like it was yesterday. It was a cold, Santa Cruz is always cold and foggy. And I remember going to her and I said, you know, I'm really struggling and it's affecting my schoolwork. Because oftentimes my kids, they went to class with me if I didn't have anyone else to watch them. Because I was determined. And I remember going to my counselor and saying, you know, I'm really struggling and I need some help. And is there anything that you can offer or what do you suggest? And she said, you know, I suggest you pack up your bags and go home. Go to your parents. Won't your parents take you back in? And I was like, yeah, they will. And she was like, well, you'll never make it. This isn't for you. This is something that, you know, you should just give up on. She was like, you could go, you can get public assistance and, you know, maybe go find your little part-time retail job, you know, where your family lives and let them help take care of you and your children. And I was crying. And when she finished her counseling session with me, initially I was sad. Then a part of me got a little mad. And I said, okay. And I said, I thanked her, you know, and I said, maybe there's something to it. So she gave me a withdrawal form. And she said, you know, if, you know, you decide you want to do it, which I strongly urge you to, fill this form out and bring it back to me and we'll get you right on out of here. And I said, okay. So I was devastated because here's someone that I trusted and looked to for that counseling and guidance that you're supposed to, you know, give to individuals. I wasn't getting that from her. So I went home, packed up as much as I can get in my little Ford Escort at the time and my babies, and I hit the road. And I remember I stopped and got gas before we hit the road. And I ran into someone who I felt was a mentor. Her name is Paula Powell. She was the Dean of African American students. At the time she ran the African American Resource Center. She was a great support for me and my children and lots of other students there. And I saw her at the gas station and she just came up to me. I hadn't said anything. I had dried up the tears because I didn't want her to know what I was going through. I didn't even mention the news that I got about my son. I just kind of dealt with that and suffered in silence about dealing with all of that. And I remember she told me, you know, I just wanted to let you know that you're great. And God feels that you're great and you're going to be doing great things. And I'm a better person having met you and known you. And she just gave me all these wonderful accolades and I was just like, what's that about? You know, it's not like I'm getting an award or anything. And I, you know, thanked her and hugged her and got in my car and hit the road, got on that 5. Heading towards LA, and the whole time I'm crying, and my son, he's looking at me. My daughter, she was too small to really understand what's going on, but he was about a little over 2, and he's looking at me, and he's like, you know, like, what's wrong with you? And so I'm driving and crying, and something just came over me where I said, I can't allow these people to be the ones to determine my fate. I remember my mother telling me that I can do anything that I put my mind to, that I can be anybody that I want to be and achieve anything that I want to achieve. I just remembered my parents, and I remember Paula Powell saying the things that she said to me.
There's greatness in you.
So I got off the freeway, turned back around, and came back to school. And unpacked the things that I packed in the car. And the following week I went to see my counselor, and I had the form. And I handed the form to her, and she said, it's blank. And I said, yes, and it's going to remain blank. And I'm not going anywhere, and I'm going to stay here. And if I have to fight tooth and nail to get my degree, that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I did.
Fight tooth and nail.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I did. And
with God's mercy.
Most definitely. Couldn't have done it without God. And so that's just the kind of spirit that I've always had. Is that you don't give up, and the same spirit when it comes to other people. My dad is like, you're always a fighter, you're always going, you're always doing.
Well, you have certainly demonstrated that. You know, you've been up against racism. You're up against being a single parent. You have a young one that had autism, and there was a lack of self-esteem.
Yes.
All of that as an African American woman, and then you turn it around to find that power, that strength, that something inside of you that's attached to greatness.
Yes.
That propelled you forward to make the decision to dig your heels in and stay. So you graduate, you move forward.
Yeah, graduate, come back to Carson, and have my first, job after graduating and working in a juvenile facility with young men who basically were incarcerated. And I just absolutely loved that job and that position and working with them. And because I looked at these young men and wanted them to be able to achieve, even though they made mistakes in life, I wanted to make sure that they had all the resources and the things that they need to continue to move forward and not let that one thing blemish them.
And then there again is the foundation, the theme, never give up.
Yes.
Get back up.
Yes. Yes.
So then, now you go into a master's program.
Yes. I enrolled in the master's program at Pepperdine in the clinical psychology with an emphasis on marriage and family therapy. And that was like the greatest experience because it was the total opposite of what I dealt with as an undergraduate at UC Santa Cruz. UC Santa Cruz was a great struggle, but I really enjoyed every bit of every moment.
It was food to your soul.
Yes, yes, yes it was, yes it was. And I learned a lot about myself and going through that process.
What did you learn about yourself?
I learned that I was a lot stronger than I thought I was. And I had a lot more together than I thought I did, especially in working with a lot of individuals. And I realized that I would always see myself in a helping profession. That I would always, yes, I would always be in a position to where I'm serving. And I knew that because, when you graduate from college and you have those student loans staring at you, oftentimes people say, okay, I got to find something that's going to give me the most bang for my buck so, I can live comfortably. But I always knew that the field that I wanted to go in wasn't going to make me rich, and I wasn't looking to be rich financially. But if I could sleep at night knowing that I help serve someone else and to uplift other people so they can kind of pay it forward, that meant more to me than anything else.
And a high salary.
Yes.
So now, because we're going that college route, so then you get your master's.
Yes.
And How is it that you migrated out here to the Inland Empire and wind up in the city of Perris?
Actually, it was my husband Jason and my children.
Okay, so now where in the process is Jason?
My husband Jason, he's in the process of, we got
During
married.
the masters?
Yes.
After the masters?
We got married right after I finished my master's degree program at Pepperdine. Yes. We went to Ochos Rios, Jamaica, and we got married. Had the best time. But he's just a wonderful person. Came into my life. Actually met him at the bank. He was working at the bank, and he used to always, I would go in, he would always write these little notes on my receipts and slip them to me, and I was like, looky here, dude, don't mess with my money. I'm here for one thing and one thing only, and that's to make a deposit or a withdrawal. I don't know all these little notes you keep putting on my receipt, you know. But one day he finally just asked me out. He said, you know, you're always looking so, you know, like you're just ready to
focused.
And I said, because you talk about my money. but yeah, he asked me out. I said yes, and the rest is history.
Is history.
Yeah, and he's been a wonderful father to my two children from my previous relationship and our daughter that we share together, Jalen. So he's a wonderful man.
So it's through him you winded up out in the Inland Empire in Perris?
Yes, because he grew up in South Central and in Watts. He grew up in Watts, lived in the projects, you know, grew up, went to Jordan High, and moved to Carson later on. But he always wanted to be out of LA County. He wanted to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city, and he wanted to live out farther.
To a slower pace of living.
Yeah. And
so he took the drive to Perris.
We would go, we would come out and take a look, and at that time, they were, you know, housing was starting to build up in cities like Perris and, you know, different areas in Riverside and San Bernardino County. And we would come out on the weekends and just drive and take a look.
And dream and look.
Yeah, dream and look and dream and look.
Like young people would do.
Yes. And initially, he was like, let's do it. He was gung-ho. And that's when the housing boom. And I said, no. I was like, we're not ready. But really, it was me not ready to make that transition.
Because it's day and night.
Yes. And, you know, with all your support and your resources, you know, my parents were in Carson, his family was out that way, so everything that you know, and then I was like, okay, our kids are not that big, they're still small, you know, what if I have to work late, you have to do this, you know, I'm working in LA, well, that means I have to go back and forth, you know, so those were the things that I was kind of worried about and hesitant about making that step. And so we would come out and we would look at different areas in the Inland Empire, and I fell more in love with the Riverside County area, and so I started doing research on the different areas, and Perris kept popping up, and we would go and we looked at Perris. We looked at Perris, we looked at Marietta, we looked at all the different areas, Riverside. And he wasn't so big on Perris. And I kept looking at Perris, and he said, why do you keep looking at that place? And so I would talk to other people, and I would say, you know, I might be interested in moving to Perris, you know, looking at houses in Perris. And I remember people saying, don't do that. Have you heard about that place? There's nothing but gangs and drugs and
sidewalks.
Yeah, and it's really bad out there.
Farm, cows.
Yeah, and there's nothing out there, and the people aren't doing anything out there. And I was like, well, it's something that keeps here to where I keep looking
Going back
to Perris. And we would keep coming out and visit. And then my husband got to the point where he was like, you know, I'm tired of dreaming, and I don't want to go out and look at houses any longer because we're not making that step. And I told him, you know, let's wait, because that's when everybody was buying houses. And I'm glad we wait, because we came in when the bubble burst, and, you know, we came back on the downstroke. So I'm so glad we did wait, because that was the best move we could have, because, you know, we could have been like a lot of the other folks who's moved out there and in
got
hot
stuck
water.
in hot water.
Yeah, underwater.
Upside down. Or
yeah. And so I looked at all the demographics of Perris before we moved. I knew we had high unemployment. I knew the poverty rate was high. I knew that they had a lot of crime issues. I knew all those things. But I still had this desire to be in Perris. You know, we had family members who said, you're making the biggest mistake in your life because you're moving to a cesspool. That was the exact word that a friend of mine said. She was like, move to Riverside, move to even Moreno Valley, move to anywhere, but don't move to Perris because Perris is a cesspool. But I just kept, you know, I said, you know what? There's a reason why we need to be there. And so my husband was like, no, we're not going to Perris, because everyone has said everything negative about Perris. And a few times we have went around, he was like, oh no, I'm getting some flashbacks from being in LA at South Central. So we looked, and it was Menifee. And we actually put a bid on that house, and that fell through. It was a foreclosure, bank owned. So that fell through. And we went to, what other city? San Jacinto. That fell through. Marietta. That fell through. So he was to the point, you know what? Forget it, we'll just stay here in Carson. We'll just make do, because this is just too heartbreaking to continue to go through this, and, you know, these things keep happening with these bank-owned homes, because at the time that's really what was out there. And so our realtor at the time was like, well, let's go check out Perris. And I had already told her, had given her the Perris, don't say Perris speech if you still want to have your job. As a realtor, don't say Perris to my husband. And she was like, well, let's just go check it out. This is one house. You know, it's not bank owned. So we pull up to the house, and my husband goes, no way. And because he's had some issues. And he's not one of those.
Lipstick and rouge.
Yeah, he's not one of those individuals that, see me, I can see the diamond in the rough and see it.
The lipstick and rouge,
yeah,
that's what I call it.
And he can't see that. But they had some brand new homes around the corner. So we took a look at those, fell in love, put an offer. Everything went perfect. And so I told him it was meant for us to be in Perris. We tried to be everywhere else, but it was meant for us to be in Perris. So that's how we got to Perris.
Isn't that amazing? That's an amazing story. Yeah, I guess you were meant to be where you were supposed to be. And then you put your bucket down. And when you put your bucket down, you got connected to everything in Riverside, because looking at how many boards you're on, how active you are in the community, and then in 2014 you become elected to the City of Perris's council.
Yes.
So tell us about that experience and why you made that choice to run for City Council.
Well, in living in Perris, and like I said before I came to Perris, I did some homework on it. But, you know, when you're not in something, you say, oh, it's not that bad. And when we moved, our first 6 months, we was moving to Perris. We had our house broken into. We had our vehicles broken into. Our daughter was walking to school, and she got jumped by about 10 girls walking to school. And so I said, something is going on here, you know. And when I went to my neighbors and talked to them, and I said, hey, we got our house broken into, and they were like, oh, do you know that's like the welcome package for new residents when they come to Perris? It was like, well, that's welcome to Perris. And there was this attitude all around of where people were just like, well, that's just what you get from Perris. And it was that, well, it's just good enough. And my parents always taught me, you live and strive for excellence. And so that's the attitude that I had. And then I was, seeing things in some of the schools, and I said, something is going on here. And shortly after we moved, I was able to transfer my job, working with the state of California in vocational rehabilitation. And lo and behold, the assignments that I get is the schools in Perris. And so I started seeing a different side of Perris, not just as a resident, but as a working in Perris and working in the schools and seeing how, talking to some of the kids and asking them, okay, because my job is to prepare them when they graduate to go on
to work.
Yeah, to work and careers and college and counseling and guiding them in those directions. And I would go in these high schools in Perris and talk to these kids, and
Make
they
your
would
hair
say,
stand up at the back of your neck.
yeah, and they would say, I never forget, there was this one young man, and I said, well, what is it that you want to do well, I want to go to college, but that's just not going to happen. And I want to be a fireman, but that's not going to happen. And I said, well, why can't that happen? It's just not. It's not in the cards for me and my family. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, no, I'm just going to go into the family business. And so I said, okay. So I'm thinking maybe carpentry, landscaping, could be any business. And so I said, well, what does your family do? He said, well, my uncle, he sells dope. So that's the same line of business I'm going to go into. He told me he can hook me up when I graduate.
Quick
so
money, fast money.
I'm going to get into that. That did it for me. Because I said, okay, my family and I, we picked up from an element, from an area, to move away from the gangs, from the drugs, from that type of environment to Perris. And here I am in Perris, having to have it face to face, to see, okay, it's alive and it's here, and it's not going anywhere. And so I started reaching out to the local electeds and the local leadership, and wasn't getting that much of a great response that I thought. And just hearing and talking to different people in the community about how they were just very unhappy with things, and this is just how Perris is, Perris is, the normalcy of Perris was, it's okay to not have, it's okay for us to have gangs, it's okay for us to have drugs, it's okay for our residents to not be educated and go on to college. That was just the normal attitude, and that was just bothering me. And so I remember I called home and I was complaining big time. I called my mom and I was like, I've been here and I went to the city council and they said this and this is happening and that's happening and going on and going on, and my mother said, okay. She wouldn't say much, and that's not like my mother. And so I was just going on and on and on.
Ranting and raving.
And next thing you know, the phone got disconnected. So I said, oh, must be the cell connection. So I called her back on her home number. So I called and I started back up where I left off, going off. Oh, in Perris, this in Perris. And the phone got disconnected again. So I said, it must be my phone. So I pick up my landline and call her. So I called back. My dad picked up the phone. And I said, what happened? I was on the phone with Mom and the phone got disconnected. And he said, oh, what were you talking about? So I started ranting and raving to him, going on and on and on. Then I hear him hang up the phone. So I said, what is going on here? My parents is hanging up on me. So I called back. And I waited a little while. And I said, they must be upset with me about something. And so I'm trying to think, what did I do? Or what didn't I do? So I called him back and I said, my mom answered the phone. And I said, you hung up on me. And she said, yes, I did. And I'm going to continue to hang up on you. She said, you've been living in Perris for about 6-7 months now. And she said, we have heard you talk about the things that's wrong in your city and what you don't like about your city. And you don't like this, and this is wrong, and that's wrong. She said, when you're ready to have a conversation about solutions, when you're ready to have a conversation about what you can be doing to make some changes about your city, then you give us a call back, and then we'll be ready to talk to you. So I was like, okay. That was a
wake-up call.
Yes, for me. And because I had the type of parents, my parents grew up in the South, segregated South, marched with King and Selma. My dad was a union member, so as a kid, walking picket lines. I didn't have the type of parents that was one of those lie down and take it kind of parents. I had one of those parents that you want to see some change and you get out there and make it happen.
In the front of the line.
Yeah, and so, that just really hit it for me. And so shortly after that, I said, you know what? I think I'm going to run for office. I had, the whole time I had people just telling me, you should run for public office, you should run for public office, especially in my union, because I'm a union member. And I said, that's not me, I'm not a politician. And then I remember a good girlfriend of mine in the union said, well, thank goodness, because we don't need any more politicians. We need people who want to serve and who care about the community. So she said, and you're doing that already. So step outside of the title, because I was like, I'm not into politics. I don't do all that. I'm not talking about foreign affairs and, I'm not into all of that. And she said,
economic development.
And she was like, and you don't have to be. She was like, but you're into people, and that's what the core of why you're doing what you're doing. And so it took a little while, it took a little people poking and prodding and staying on top of me, and I finally decided that I was going to run. Yeah, and so I'm the type of person that I like to be prepared in anything that I do. So I applied for this program called Emerge California, and it's a program that recruits and trains women to run for public office. And it's like the Harvard and Yale of political training. And so a friend of mine had encouraged me, same friend who told me you should run, kept throwing Emerge at me, and I said, look, if it's the Harvard and Yale of political training, then I'm not going to get in the program, because I'm not a Harvard and Yale political person. And so I applied, got in, and the moment I completed the program, I started running for public office, and won in 2014 and got on the council.
And so there's a mindset that's in Perris. There's an good old boy mindset that's in Perris.
Yes.
So when you were elected to the city council, what was the beauty that you saw when you sat on that council? And on the other hand, what were the challenges that you saw sitting on that council? Because it came with both.
Yes, it did. Well, when I ran for council, I had a lot of people telling me not to. I had a lot of the experts saying I would never get the position because I'm a black woman. I had so many people tell me that it's not in my cards, don't do it, because Perris is a predominantly Latino community. Over 70% of the population is Latina, and they said, because I'm not Latina, there's no way I would win that race. And especially at this time, David and I was running, they said there's no way they will elect two of you, so I'm the kind of person, if you tell me I can't do something, I ain't gonna do something, I won't do anything. I'm the type of person that says, okay, yes I am. And so I ran and won and actually got the highest votes of
The
everyone
vote
that
count.
was running. And I remember the night of the swearing in, because that night when I looked into the room, the chambers, the council chambers, never had I seen in Perris, one, that many people come to the city council chambers for anything. Two, to see so many different people of all walks of life, of all races, all cultures, all ages, you know, all types of folks, you know,
Because there's history in the
affluent,
making.
people who, you know, who were poor, just all types of people were there, and were very excited and very happy about the change that happened with that race, with David and myself coming on the council. And it was at that point that it really registered to me on how important the role and the position that I'm in. And then it also dawned on me how important that I need to make sure I do what I need to do in order to help, you know, move the city in a direction that it needed to move in. And so I always keep that in mind. You know, I had a friend of mine when I was running. I had a friend of mine who told me. I had a friend of mine that said, you know, always remember why you are doing what you're doing, and you won't get caught up in the celebrity, you know, part of the whole politics. And so what I did was
because that can so easily happen.
Yeah.
So that's gonna lead to my. I have two more questions. It's going to lead to who inspired you? Who has been your inspiration? Has there been a couple of people, or has it just been your parents, or what has inspired you to be this strong, beautiful African American woman that you are today?
I would have to say my mother. My mother has been a true inspiration. My mother is one of those kick butts and take names kind of ladies, and she's always instilled in me that, you know, my dad, he's the softie of the family, and my mother is the one that, oh no, if there's a door in your way, we're gonna kick it down. One of my favorite sayings that she says is, because, you know, she's from the South, and folks from the South always have something, you know, some little saying. And she always tell me, well, Tonya, if the front door is locked, then go through the side window. You know, she always taught me that don't let anything or anyone stop you or determine what it is that you want in life. And I've always, you know, kept that with me. And she was so tough. I was also so afraid, you know, oh, if my mama find out I'm not doing my 100%, she gonna come and get me. So that's always in the back of my mind, even today on the council, because she follows. She'll send me, she'll call me and say, I saw this on Facebook, or I saw this on, you know, on the internet. This person said this. I heard this going on. What's your plans to address it? You know, so, you know, she's one of my biggest supporters, but she's, you know, I always like to, I have what I call a chin checking crew that I keep around me that make sure that they check my chin at any and all costs, to make sure I stay on the path that I need to stay on at any given time, that they'll pull my coattail. And so she has no problem with
doing that,
pulling my coattail. And you know, recently we had Hillary Clinton come to Perris, which was a major thing, and I played a great role in having that happen.
Yeah, I saw the pictures.
And with Congresswoman Maxine Waters, I'm very grateful to her for that. And my parents are like the biggest Clinton supporters. But I did not tell them that Hillary Clinton was coming to Perris because it happened so fast. And so she and my dad found out. He talked to one of my kids and they said, oh yeah, Mom left because we were on vacation when it happened, so I had to leave and fly down for the event and then fly back. But my daughter told my dad, oh, Mom's not here with us on vacation. She went back home. And he's like, what happened? Why did she go back home? And then it's like, oh, she had some important business. So my dad called, what happened that's so important that you had to leave your family on vacation and come back? And I said, Hillary Clinton's coming, Dad. And he was like, oh, I'm not going to tell your mom. Because she'll have a fit if Hillary Clinton's coming and she's not there. And I said, okay. I said, but I couldn't. I said, I had to make sure that the residents, the people of Perris, had this seat. I said, I understand, you know, there's perks and benefits that come with the position, but we not having no perks and benefits that's coming with the position. And he said, so I won't tell him. And so he had my son, because he doesn't do the text, so he had my son text him and text me, and he said, get your armor on. He said, because Grandma found out about Hillary Clinton. She saw you on the news, and she said, I always have to find out everything what's going on in Perris on the news or on Facebook or on the internet. I got a daughter sitting on the council, and I have to find out what's happening in Perris from somewhere else. So I caught it with that one, but she was very happy to see that happened for the city of Perris.
The city of Perris. Mm-hmm. So now my final question is a question that needs to be asked of all young politicians, mm-hmm. because 20 years from now, 15 years from now, when you have passed the torch, mm-hmm. or moved on in your political career, which mm-hmm. more than likely will happen, mm-hmm. and that young person looks at this interview, mm-hmm. what is it about your legacy, or what is it that young person do you feel is going to say that you did actually accomplish mm-hmm. in this first chapter of your life regarding becoming an elected official?
Well, I think, and that's a great question, because one of the things I always, when people tell me that they want to either move on or move up in a position or higher office, and friends that I have that are serving, or just people want to move on and do other things, I always ask them, what kind of legacy did you leave? What did you do? Did you do what you set out to do? And the one thing that I think that I want individuals to take from me in serving is that I remain true to who I am, where I came from. I didn't lose that in the process, and that the people who I serve always came first. I want to always make sure that, yes, I'm a politician, but I'm a child of God and a servant first. And I want that to always be reflected in everything that I do. And unapologetically, because I've gotten flack about being a Christian woman and saying so from the dais. And, I've had people tell me, stop telling people that you love God or you're a Christian, because they won't vote for you, or they won't. I said, well, then I'm not their candidate anyway. So I just want to make sure that I always leave behind that you can do this job, be true to yourself, be true to who you are, and still serve your God in doing so. And that's what I want to leave behind. That's what I want people to know, that I put God's people first.
Okay, well, that's a wrap. We want to thank you, Miss Tonya Burke, so much for this interview. We've got a little snapshot into you, and we have enjoyed this interview, and we thank you for coming.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to seeing it, and I think it's a great project and one that's needed.